Evening. Buyer's remorse. Buy a new car? I'll be moving in. Let's get started.
Sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I bought it from Carvana.
You what?
Yeah, great price. I even have 7 days to love it or return it.
So there's no...
No buyer's remorse. More like buyer's rejoice.
I guess I'll let myself out. Congratulations. I mean it.
Buyer's rejoice. Buy your car today on Carvana.
Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
You say I talk too much, say I ask the wrong things, but if the truth feels weird, then I'm pulling that string. So quote me, it's probably nothing, just asking questions, yeah, that's my thing. Laughing through chaos, digging through lies, if it makes you uncomfortable, I'm doing it right. So quote me, it's probably nothing, say it too loud, now it's stuck in your head. If this all goes wrong, just remember I said it's probably nothing.
Hi. I said that hi kind of low. Welcome back to Don't Quote Me, It's Probably Nothing. I don't know why I said that like that. But this is the podcast where I get high and talk about weird stuff. And hi, I am. And also I'm Kelly. And today we're going to the underground, the deep south. Hopefully you guys have seen Little Nicky. Otherwise I've said the deep south for no reason. Also, pardon. Well, not pardon. I don't want to say pardon my hair and makeup, but I did my hair and makeup and it looks so cute. But did you guys just hear my stomach growl? I'm super hungry. I haven't eaten all day. That was a really long growl. Also, I'll BRB because I just remembered I made some delicious coffee and I forgot to grab it. So I will be right back. I'm back. Also, I got another Bluey mug. I don't know if I held that up the right way. Hold on. Here. And I mean in the camera because I hid the camera on my screen so that I wasn't looking at myself the whole time because it's weird. Anyway, also, if you hear lawnmowers, literally everyone and their mother is out cutting their grass today. And that sucks for me because now that means I need to cut my grass. I almost said third world problems, but I guess first world problems. That would be right. I don't know. Anyway, I don't remember where I left off before this. So my apologies. I do remember one thing I was going to say though, because I did like my hair and makeup. Don't get used to it because this probably won't happen again for a really long time. But anyway, we are going to the very tippy top of Long Island, New York, to a place called Camp Hero. And if you've never heard it before, it's totally fine because I'm about to tell you all about it. So technically, it was just like a military installation where they had like a radar station and coastal defense and like totally normal government stuff. But if you're listening to this, obviously you know I am far from normal. So we're going to talk about all of the unnormal things like underground labs and mind control and psychic experiments and someone who may or may not have accidentally manifested a creature out of thin air. All the completely normal United States government stuff. The usual. Also, pardon my laughs. So I guess get to doing whatever it is you do while listening to podcasts. And let's talk about it. Well, like I'm going to talk about it and you're listening to it. So let's listen about it. Okay. So Camp Hero is located in Montauk, New York. Did I say New Jersey earlier? I don't think so. Maybe I did. Anyway, it's right at the like eastern end of Long Island. And today, most of the former military property is part of Camp Hero State Park and is roughly 469 acres with woods and wetlands and beaches and like all that fun stuff. And if you look at pictures of it, it doesn't like scream normal state park because there's like old military structures and abandoned looking buildings. And then also this like giant radar tower. But before we get into like the conspiracy stuff about this place, I'm going to talk about like what it was originally. Okay. So, I'm so sorry for all my okays and so's. It's like, I don't know how to like transition to the next part with it sounding normal or like without sounding like a robot or something like that. So I always just say, okay, so, so my bad. It was really hard for me not to say, okay, so right there. Okay. So this site was developed as a coastal defense installation around World War II. And the U.S. military was concerned about protecting all of like the open spaces, like coming up to New York, like the ocean and stuff, like on the outside. And according to records from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Camp Hero was used for military activities during World War II, and they had guns everywhere. But like these guns were like 16-inch coastal guns is what they called them. And I had to Google what they look like because 16 inches doesn't sound like a big gun, but they're not like 16 inches long. The hole, like where the I guess bullet or shell or whatever comes out, is 16 inches like round. And that's extra large. So they had like the M1895 and the M1919 and the M20, and they probably have a bunch of others. I wonder if those numbers were like the year that it was made, you know? But anyway, I'll try to add a picture somewhere in this video, like in this area. But they're basically like these huge guns, and they're taller than humans, obviously. And they have this really long, huge like barrel, I guess. And I think it had to be so long because they had to be able to shoot like boats that were in the ocean, or like, I don't know, planes in the air or something like that. But anyway, they also had like smaller guns and like anti-aircraft weapons all in like that same area. But so part of like the military installations that they call them were designed to blend into the surrounding landscape. So some structures were made to resemble like ordinary buildings or look like little tiny fishing villages. I don't know why I did this, but I did. Probably tiny. It's tiny. Anyway, so that kind of makes sense because if they're coming in from the air, they'd be like, look, a cute little fishing area, instead of like, oh dang, look at that giant gun over there. Would totally fool them, I think. But there were also barracks and mess halls and medical facilities and underground bunkers. So most people say that the underground bunkers were used to store ammunition, but other people out there say that the underground bunkers were used to bend time. And that's where my brain's going to be going today, and yours, since you're listening to this. So after World War II, the nature of like the military threat changed, and they weren't necessarily worried about ships approaching the coastline anymore. They were worried about the Cold War because the Soviet Union had long-range bombers, and nuclear weapons were becoming increasingly terrifying of a reality. I said that so wrong. An increasingly terrifying reality is what I wanted to say. But anyway, so because of this, a portion of Camp Hero's property was transferred to the Air Force, and then that became the Montauk Air Force Station in the early 1950s. And then in 1960, an enormous ANFPS 35 radar tower and antenna was installed, and it was super duper huge. It was designed to like provide surveillance data. It was designed to, I'm going to edit this part, like the part that happened before this. I'm going to edit it out. But literally, I just reminded myself of the video of that one girl. She was young and she was trying to sing the "and I" part of "I Will Always Love You" by Whitney Houston or whatever. And she kept singing it and then screaming because she was messing up. That just popped into my mind because I kept messing up this part. But anyway, the tower and stuff was designed to provide surveillance data about like aircraft in the area. And it was so big that people were like, yeah, something weird's definitely going on here. And I wanted to make it an inappropriate joke and be like, it was so big that they were like, look at those big socks. Also, my nickname in high school was Big Socks by Anthony. I don't even know if he listens to this. If you do, hey, Big Socks. Anyway, so eventually the military presence at Camp Hero came to an end, and the remaining military personnel, they left around 1980, and the Air Force was permanently closed. Sorry, not the Air Force, the Air Force facility. I think the Air Force is still around, but this Air Force facility was permanently closed in 1982, and the property was transferred to state, local, and federal entities by 1984. And then it became what we now know as Camp Hero State Park. But not too long after that, there's a story that starts circulating about what supposedly happened there during the 70s and 80s. And that was a secret story project, a secret project that eventually became capable of manipulating human consciousness itself. And see, I talk with my hands all the time. And I have to if someone tied my hands together, I don't think I'd be able to talk. I'd probably be like, hey, buddy, can you undo this, please? If my husband's listening to this, he's going to be like, so that's what I have to do to get you to stop talking? Anyway, so the story that started all of this was the Philadelphia experiment. And that was where in 1943, during World War II, the US Navy is trying to develop technologies that could give ships an advantage. And according to this experiment, something was being attempted aboard this Navy destroyer called the USS Eldridge. And the goal was to make this ship invisible. Not invisible to where I can't see it in the dark. Invisible to it just disappears from your eyes. So in order to do that, allegedly, to everything.
Best thing that's ever happened to you financially. Go.
Easy. Sold my car on Carvana. Amazing offer.
Really? I hit 200 on a scratcher.
Did the scratcher come to your house and hand you a check?
No.
How many scratchers did you hit to get that? I hit a button on Carvana.com once.
Okay, that's fair.
It's like the lottery, except you always win.
Not like the lottery at all, actually.
Exactly. Inexplicably good. Offers worth bragging about. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
That I'm talking about. Allegedly, the Navy was conducting a secret experiment involving powerful electromagnetic fields. And the basic idea was that if you could manipulate the electromagnetic field surrounding the ship strongly enough, then you could supposedly bend or distort light around it. And if you could do that, then the ship could become invisible. So sometimes they call this Project Rainbow, by the way. But this came from a man who called himself Carlos Allende, but his real name was supposedly Carl Meredith Allen. But in the 1950s, he began writing letters to Morris K. Jessup. And Jessup was an astronomy author, he was an astronomist. He was an astronomist and an author. And he had written a book called The Case of the UFO. And his book was obviously about UFOs, hence the title. But then also some pretty unconventional ideas about space and physics. And he believed that he knew something that Jessup didn't. And he claimed that the Navy had conducted an experiment in 1943 that caused the USS Eldridge to become invisible, but that it wasn't just invisible, it teleported. So this is his story. I need the Law and Order. Dun dun. These are their. Oh wait, that comes first. And these are their stories. Dun dun. Sorry, this is what happens when I smoke pot and then don't eat anything all day. So sorry. Anyway, so the story goes that powerful generators were installed aboard the ship, and then the Navy activated them, and an electromagnetic field supposedly surrounded the vessel, and then the ship disappeared. And then some say it became invisible to the people watching from the outside, but according to this guy, the ship disappeared from Philadelphia and then appeared in Virginia hundreds of miles away and then came back. And if that wasn't weird enough, there are claims that the experiment had horrific consequences for the crew. So some sailors said they became violently ill. Others became disoriented, and men supposedly became embedded in the ship's metal structure, which is absolutely wild. You know what it reminds me of? There's something that's in my mind. I think it's pink or gray, and there's someone embedded into this thing. Maybe it was bubblegum. It was a bubblegum commercial, I think. I think they blew a bubble and it exploded, and then the kid was inside the bubblegum. Maybe. Or it was, anybody else remember that? It was a commercial in the 90s or early 2000s maybe. What was I talking about again? Oh, yeah. The men supposedly became embedded in the ship's metal structure. So some also went insane. And then there's other stories of sailors who supposedly became trapped in some sort of bizarre state where they would suddenly appear and disappear, which that has to be wild to be on a boat looking at something. And then there's people who are 1 minute they're there and then the next minute they're not, and then they're there again. You would have to think you're losing your mind, Anyway, the Navy actually was manipulating ships' electromagnetic fields by what is called degaussing, I think it's called. And that's where electrical cables, they install them around portions of the ship, and then they're energized in a way that alters its magnetic field. And then that's so that they don't activate the magnetic mines that are out there in the oceans. But anyway, Carlos Allen's story gets even stranger because he claimed that he had personally witnessed some of what happened, and he sent letters to Morris Jessup describing the experiment, and a version of Jessup's book was returned to him with annotations written in the margins, and they supposedly discussed secret military technology, extraterrestrials, and other unusual subjects. And that's what we're going to talk about. So the annotations were attributed to 3 different people using like initials or names, like that's how they signed it. And this version of that eventually became known as the Vero edition. And people began interpreting the annotations as evidence that like the government or someone with access to classified information was secretly communicating with Jessup. And so people began interpreting the annotations as evidence that the government or someone with access to classified information was secretly communicating with Jessup. And since I just explained that whole origin story, now I can talk about all of the things. I have 16 pages of notes. We're going to talk about everything. But since I told you all of that, I can finally talk about the man who claimed he knew what really happened at Montauk. And that is Preston Nichols. So, according to Nichols, he began recovering memories of working at the Montauk facility, and those memories supposedly revealed an enormous secret project involving radar and mind control and psychic abilities and time manipulations, and eventually so much more than that. But the first edition of the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, which is a book, was published in 1992 by Nichols and Peter Moon, and this book describes Nichols' memories and experiences. And according to this book, his interest in the Philadelphia experiment led him towards Montauk. And as he was investigating, he began experiencing something he interpreted as recovered memories. And according to the story, the memories weren't like all necessarily coming back at once. He began piecing things together, and he investigated and talked to people, and then he connected names and places. And then eventually he'd like discovered that he'd been working at Montauk Air Force Station, and he connected the experiments to radar and electromagnetic technology. And then eventually he came to believe that the radar technology was capable of doing things like far beyond detecting aircraft. And he was talking about like using electromagnetic energy to interact with human emotions and thoughts and consciousness and physical matter, and then eventually time itself. So he began looking into the history of the Montauk installation, and he believed that it was like, he believed his memories weren't random, but were connected to like a larger program that had been operating secretly at Camp Hero. And the more that he dug, the stranger it became, because then he met Duncan Cameron. And Duncan wasn't just like some other technician. He supposedly had extraordinary psychic abilities. And those abilities became extremely important to the experiments. So science allegedly, I keep saying allegedly because I don't want to get in trouble. Anyway, so science allegedly discovered that Duncan could interact with technology in ways that other people couldn't. And eventually they built an entire machine around his mind, and they called it the Montauk chair. Also, if someone built a machine around my mind, what do you think that would look like? I don't know if it would look like a chair. Probably a padded room. That's what that would look like. But anyway, so the Montauk chair supposedly takes radar, electromagnetic fields, military technology, and memory and connects it to human consciousness. And the chair could amplify a person's thoughts and psychic abilities. And Duncan Cameron was the person who can make it work. So the basic concept is that the person sits in the chair, and then the brain activity is monitored, and then the machine detects signals, and then electromagnetic equipment amplifies them. So the ultimate goal was to allow the operator to use their mind to interact with the physical world. And because Duncan had psychic abilities, they were all like, well, here you go. Here's our guy. This is the guy that we're going to use. And at first, it wasn't anything like too crazy. There were like thoughts and images and like sensations. But then they discovered that he could supposedly influence physical reality, and then started to push the experiments so much further. Also, I just remembered it's someone's birthday today, so I'm going to text them real quick and say happy birthday, because I wanted to do it earlier and I forgot. Also, if you're listening to this, happy birthday, Betty. Also, she's a comedian named Betty Smithsonian, and you should go look her up. Okay. I just said happy birthday. But anyway, so Duncan, he would sit in the chair with his eyes closed, right? And then the researchers and stuff would activate the equipment, and he would focus on a specific thought or image. And then the researchers would observe the corresponding changes in the equipment. And apparently Duncan's brainwaves could somehow be translated into a signal, and then that signal could be amplified. So our brains do produce electrical activity, which is measurable. And like today we use EEGs to like scan brain waves and stuff. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce what EEG stands for. You can look it up yourself. But anyway, according to Nichols, the radar equipment at Camp Hero was being modified and repurposed to transmit and receive information related to human consciousness. And then that's what they used, the Montauk chair. So eventually, Duncan was able to use that chair to like manifest objects. So the idea was that his consciousness could somehow interact with what the Montauk researchers called the ether. And from that, something could supposedly be brought into physical existence. And the researchers believed that Duncan was doing like exactly that. And once they believed he had discovered this ability, they started experimenting with something much bigger than that. And that is time. I don't know why I did this, but that's what time's like when I'm talking about it. So supposedly Duncan could allegedly focus on a specific point in the past or the future, and then the equipment would amplify his psychic signal. And then that signal could interact with the structure of space-time. And then it could record what he was generating and create like a
Best thing that's ever happened to you financially. Go.
Easy. Sold my car on Carvana. Amazing offer.
Really? I hit 200 on a scratcher.
Did the scratcher come to your house and hand you a check?
No.
How many scratchers did you hit to get that? I hit a button on Carvana.com once.
Okay, that's fair.
It's like the lottery, except you always win.
Not like the lottery at all, actually.
Exactly. Inexplicably good. Offers worth bragging about. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
other opening somewhere else. So apparently they explored Mars and they were looking for evidence of living inhabitants through like different periods. And supposedly, again, they found them, but they had to go back like 125,000 years to do it. And while doing all of the time stuff, while like looking into the different portals and stuff, they saw the USS Eldridge that I mentioned earlier in 1943, and they saw Duncan, the 1943 version of Duncan, on the ship, not the 1983 Duncan. The 1983 Duncan was in the chair. And because like that would create a time paradox, researchers allegedly prevented the modern Duncan in the chair from seeing himself on the boat. And the researchers were like, okay, this has gone too far. Like, we're really going to mess something up. Okay. So they were talking privately amongst themselves for like a super long while, and they were concerned super duperly because the experiments were getting harder to control, and they thought that they were violating like fundamental laws of nature, and they were afraid of what like continuing the experiments would do, you know? So there was a way to end the project, but only Duncan could activate it. So they had to somehow get Duncan to trigger it while he was sitting in the chair. So someone walked up to him while he was in there, and they're like, they whisper, "The time is now." They were like, "The time is now." I don't know what that whisper sounds like on here, by the way, but I do know my microphone might be too loud. But anyway, so that little whisper that they did was supposedly like all it took for Duncan to activate the contingency that they called it. But something happened when he did that. Okay, so according to this book, there was a large, hairy, hungry, and violent creature. I literally just described myself. Just kidding, I'm not violent. But anyway, so that creature was like a physical creature, and it began moving throughout the facility because he manifested it using his brain, and it ended up destroying equipment, and it attacked objects and like ate whatever it could find and literally created complete chaos. And then researchers were like, oh no, because they had no idea how to control it. So they did the next best thing that they thought would work, and they shut down the transmitter. Now, supposedly, that caused the time portal to collapse, and then the time tunnel just closed, and then everything was just like over, or at least that's what they wanted everyone to believe. So they claimed that researchers essentially sealed the facility, but there's more, because that's when they started experimenting on other people. So some of those people were children and would eventually become known as the Montauk Boys. So the Montauk Project allegedly needed human subjects to test its developing mind control and psychic technologies. And supposedly, children were considered particularly useful because their minds were like more adaptable, and they were more impressionable and more capable of developing unusual psychic abilities, essentially easier to manipulate. And their goal was to program, I was going to say something weird in an accent. Their goal was to program their minds and turn children into human weapons. And also, I want to note here, MK Ultra was a real thing. But anyway, so some children were taken against their will, allegedly, and they would take homeless children or children who were otherwise like vulnerable, maybe orphans or something. And others were taken from surrounding communities. Also, speaking of orphans, which is totally sad. It's so sad that there's orphans out there. But every time I hear the word orphan, I'm like, my mind goes back to like, I don't know, the late 1800s and someone in raggedy clothes with like a cloth tied around a stick. That's what I think of every time I hear orphan. Also, there was a movie. Maybe it was called The Little Princess, maybe, but she was an orphan and she lived in this thing and they kept her locked in this one room and her dad was like in the war or something like that, but he was hurt or blind or something and in a wheelchair, if I remember correctly. And he came looking for her, but then this evil lady who like worked there like tried to lock her in something, and there was this genie type thing, I think, that was trying to help her. And then they make like a rope and she like walks across the rope to the next building to meet her dad, and he doesn't recognize her at first, but then he does recognize her. I forget the name of that movie. I really do think it was called The Little Princess. Maybe, but if maybe whoever's listening to this, you guys know what movie I'm talking about, but it was one of my favorites. Anyway, I forget where I left off. Oh yeah, orphans. Allegedly, they were brought underground and subjected to like various experiments. And researchers, essentially, I said it like that because I had to say that word 8 times because I kept researchers. Anyway, so researchers essentially wanted to create children capable of entering altered states of consciousness, like on command. And they supposedly used repetition, sensory manipulation, electromagnetic stimulation, hypnosis, isolation, fear, and psychological conditioning. They tried to unlock psychic abilities. And the idea was that a child's mind could potentially be trained to see things remotely and receive information and influence other people and projects and thoughts and interact with the Montauk chair. Now, of the ones who were kidnapped, some were identified as having like unusually strong psychic abilities, and those children were given additional training, and the strongest subjects were used as psychic operators. And one of the most prominent people associated with the Montauk boys is Stuart Swerdlow, and he claimed that he himself was a victim of the Montauk program, and he described being subjected to experiments involving mind control, psychic abilities, altered states, programmings, trauma, and like manipulation of consciousness. Supposedly, the children could be programmed with specific instructions, and this is sometimes called deep programming, and like the subject could just be given a trigger, and that would be like a word or a phrase or a signal, and that would trigger, like it would activate a particular behavior or maybe become a weapon of sorts. Psychic abilities could potentially be used for like intelligence gathering, surveillance, interrogation, psychological warfare, remote viewing, influence, communication, and even attacks against an enemy's mind. If I could go into someone else's mind, it would be like speaking of little Nicky that I mentioned earlier, when he's like, Adrian, get in the flask. But like before that, he like goes into they're like speaking with their minds. It's like, what are you doing here? You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, the United States and the Soviet Union really did investigate claims involving parapsychology and psychic phenomena, and the US government eventually funded remote viewing research. I just wanted to put that out there. But anyway, eventually, after all of that stuff going on, researchers supposedly encountered non-human intelligence. Some described like extraterrestrial beings, and others described interdimensional entities, and then some blend the two together. But the technology supposedly allowed communication or interaction with beings outside of normal human reality. So remember that time window thing with like the creating portals and all that stuff? So the children's minds were supposedly being trained to interact with those portals. But that's all we know about that. That's it. Nothing else about it. What did they do with it? What did they see? What did they let in? Also, do you think like okay, so there's probably different portals out there where ley lines intersect in all of the state parks that are owned by the government that you're not allowed to see. Anyway, do you think the portals there are what the children opened and that like that's why people go missing in that area? You know? They go missing because they get sucked into a portal and then they get chucked across the ocean somewhere else and they're like, how the heck did I get here? And I can't get back because, yeah, I'm in Brazil, but like on a completely different timeline. You know, do you think that's that? Do you think that's that thing that happened? That? But anyway, we don't know anything else. We don't know anything else because apparently their memories were erased. And then some of the children, they were released. Some suffered psychological trauma, which probably, and some were kept inside the program. And there's a pretty dark claim regarding the children in trauma, and that is that the researchers created the trauma on purpose because trauma was believed to unlock psychic potential. And then Duncan and the Beast obviously became Duncan and the Beast. They came like after the children, and supposedly Nichols physically destroyed the equipment himself because it was continuing to work like after they shut it down. And also, I don't know if you guys know this is where they got the idea for Stranger Things. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think it's real? Or that it really happened? Because I do. I wouldn't put anything past our government is what I'm going to say. So yes, it did. But anyway, yeah. Sorry if I talked super duper fast. I'm hungry and I can't think of what to eat. I want like everything. So I want something that's good for you, like a salad or something, or maybe like chicken. But like I also kind of want steak. But then I haven't had a Chili's mozzarella stick in so long. It's been so long. It's been since February. It's been since February. Today is August 21st. Okay. And it was like Valentine's Day weekend was the last time I had a Chili's mozzarella stick. And I can just taste it. The crunch. It's because it's like a little bit crunchy, but like super soft and gooey because of the cheese. So good. Mozzarella sticks are literally the best food ever created on this earth. But anyway, thanks for spiraling me on this fine Friday. And I hoped you loved the episode. And if you did, maybe you could like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. I have 14 subscribers. So hello, all 14 of you. Nice to see you. But yeah, you could do that. And then like if you go on Spotify or Apple, maybe you could give 5 stars or something. Pick number 2, me lord. Or wait. Pick number 3, me lord. That was from Shrek, if you guys were wondering. Anyway, but if you do give me 5 stars and you leave a review, you can say something like, "This girl's crazy weird for sure, but I like it." And then you can tell your friends about it, maybe. Probably, maybe. Yeah. Don't forget to check out the Screaming Podcast Network because, like, if you like, I don't know, screaming or something, you can check them out. You might like it. The song of the week this week is Cemeteries by Beila, and go stream it and scream it because it is so good. And I hope you guys have the best day ever. Sorry, an Amazon truck just drove by and that thing looked like it was on hydraulics because the back was bouncing like this and it was like, Anyway, I hope you have the best day ever. Stay weird, stay curious, go be kind to someone for no reason, and go be amazing.
Drive past cemeteries on my commute to work. Makes me think too hard about the time that I've got left on earth. The legacy that I'll leave, what the engraving on my headstone will read. Was I enough to keep a fire burning in someone? Can only hope that they'll remember me for who I was. Not my mistakes or all the shortfalls that led me astray. I'll never know. I've always been the outcast, too short and extra loud, playing picture perfect just to try and make my parents proud. I know I'm still the weak link, and once I'm gone I'm scared I still won't belong. I learned to hide all of the greatest things about myself. Thought they were flaws, but eventually life could come and go. I'll try to make the most of it, hold memories in place and put off my fate. Don't wanna waste any second of the time allotted. Say my goodbyes and try to do all the things I promised. Knowing what I know, would it be easier to die alone? I'll never know.
Best thing that's ever happened to you financially. Go.
Easy. Sold my car on Carvana. Amazing offer.
Really? I hit 200 on the scratcher.
Did the scratcher come to your house and hand you a check?
No.
How many scratchers did you hit to get that? I hit a button on Carvana.com once.
Okay, that's fair.
It's like the lottery, except you always win.
Not like the lottery at all, actually.
Exactly. Inexplicably good. Offers worth bragging about. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.